Now, we'll try to understand one more important topic from AWS, which is shared responsibility model. Because in the certification, like cloud practitioner, I have noticed there are a few questions which comes under from this respective topic. So to understand the shared responsibility model, let me tell you a simple story here. Let's say there is a big apartment and it is for rental purpose. It's a very big apartment. I can give this apartment for rental purpose. Now here if you observe, I am the owner of this apartment, right? So what is my responsibility as a owner? So I am the responsibility for this building structure. I am the responsible for the electricity, right? Electrical wiring. I am also responsible for water piping, okay, for water pipelines, and also responsible for the lift to make sure the lift is functioning every time. Okay, I am also responsible for the security gate to make sure the security is available at the gate, and fire safety. As a building owner, I'll make sure these are functioning properly. If any of this breaks, I need to fix it because it is my responsibility as a owner. Now, what about the tenants? Right? They're the tenants who going to use these resources. Okay, now let's say you are the tenant and you are part of this apartment and it is your flat. So, what is your responsibility here with respect to this flat? So, your responsibility is to make sure your flat is locked. Right? Your door is locked properly. And the furniture that is part of your flat and the appliances and keeping the house clean. Okay, right? And it is your responsibility if you are allowing anyone, it is your responsibility of the security, the person that whom you are allowing inside your flat. Okay, if you leave the flat door open, the owner is not responsible. That if you leave the door open, the owner is not responsible because it is your responsibility. So if you observe here, the responsibility shared between the owner and the user, right? In the same way, whenever we go to AWS cloud to access its resources, even for this cloud, the responsibility is shared between user and this cloud computing service provider, here the AWS. It means we can't blame the AWS every time for everything. You need to understand what is your responsibility if you are going to the cloud and what is the AWS cloud responsibility. Okay, the AWS cloud, it secures the cloud. It secures the cloud. And it is your responsibility for the resources that which you had access from the cloud. To make it clear, okay, AWS is the responsible for the data center buildings, right? AWS is responsible for these data center buildings where these IT resources are maintained, right? It is responsible for the physical servers which are running inside these data centers, and it is responsible for the continuous power supply, and it is responsible for the cooling system, and it is responsible for this security of these data centers. Okay, it means AWS is responsible, right? AWS is responsible in handling this infrastructure. And what is your responsibility as a user? Your responsible is if you are trying to log in into this AWS, right? If you are trying to access the resources by logging into this AWS, it is your responsible to protect this login credentials, to protect these passwords, right? So it is your responsible to protect these login credentials. And using this AWS cloud, you have set up a server and you are running your application. It is your responsible to maintain this application security. And it is your responsible to whom you want to allow this access this application. So networking rules of this application and security related issues of this application. So it means you're going to handle what you put on AWS. So what you put on AWS, that is your responsibility. Right? So this is what you need to understand before you go to the AWS cloud. So in the AWS, this security is shared between you and the AWS. So this AWS is securing the cloud infrastructure and the customers are securing their applications and the data and the access that you put inside this AWS. So if I connect this story to the, so if you go to the AWS cloud, let me take one example. In the AWS, we have a service called EC2, stands for Elastic Cloud Computing or Elastic Compute Cloud. So we have a service called EC2, Elastic Compute Cloud. Now using this service, we may set up a server. Okay, we may create a server in this AWS by using this service. This service fall under the category of IaaS, Infrastructure as Service. It means what are the resources that you have selected using this service to set up your server, it is your responsibility. Okay, let's say I selected a resources to set up the server. I selected a software configuration. I selected a hardware configuration to set up the server. Now this service is part of the infrastructure as service. It means what are the infrastructure that are selected? It is a responsibility of the user. It means I selected the software configuration as Windows as my operating system for this respective server. It is the user responsibility to update this Windows time to time because this service fall under the infrastructure as service. It means where the user have the more control for the infrastructure that they have selected. Right? So based on the resource which you have selected, the responsibility also shared between you and the respective cloud platform. I hope it is clear to everyone. So we'll see you in the next session. Thank you.